There's something remarkable about the way the dance sequence in Aftersun seems to explain the whole movie. This is something I've looked at before in my video on musical subjectivity, but I don't think I went far enough. The film follows the story of Sophie as she looks back on a holiday that she shared with her dad, something we're led to believe was the last significant time they ever spent together. We see her sift through her memories like someone looking through old photos, but where those photos are blurred or burnt at the edges.
Pass it here.
Director Charlotte Wells never clearly defines what's subjective and what's objective in the film, but there exists a scale of sorts where the tapes that Sophie is looking at are at one end, the objective end, and the scenes with Callum by himself are at the other end, the subjective end. We assume that Sophie has dramatised these moments in her head, whilst taken fragments of memories from other times and implanted them into this holiday, maybe hearing her dad crying in the night. It's the same with Callum walking into the sea alone, or when he buys the rug that he can't afford. Very few films have achieved what Kazuo Ishiguro, whose novels often deal with characters looking back at their lives from a distant vantage point, has called the texture of memory.
I think there's a very close affinity that we all recognise between photographs and memory. That's why photographs are so important for us, and why they're so good at evoking the past. When you see a photograph of your parents or whatever, there's a texture of memory hovering around photographs, particularly old photographs.
Ishiguro has gone as far as to say that basically no films have achieved this texture, but I'd argue that Aftersun, in the way that it deals with subjectivity and perspective, gets very close to feeling like memory. Take the moment when Sophie sees two boys kissing, for example. She looks down on the scene from above, and we hear soft electronic music by composer Oliver Coates. It makes me ask, what's at the edge of this memory? Why are we being shown it? Or, more to the point, why is Sophie thinking about it? We know from the end of the film that Sophie is gay.
Happy birthday, Sophie.
So maybe she's thinking about this because she was going through these feelings as a child during this time. But we also know that her father was dealing with his sexuality.
You do all your own, man.
You sound like my anane, my mother's mom.
Your grandma.
Yeah.
So did she actually see him kiss another man and she's edited the memory in her head?
Nice to meet you, just hurry.
Thankfully, Charlotte Wells never gives answers to questions like these, to the movie's credit. The texture of memory which this ambiguity affords is far more powerful than objective truth. And whilst we can glean a lot from the ending of the film, the framing of Sophie watching the tapes, I think you could stop the movie right after the dance sequence and the thesis would still work. But to understand this, we're going to need a new term. In his essay on what he calls the non-diegetic fallacy, musicologist Ben Winters argues that most of the music which we say is being non-diegetic part of the musical score could actually exist within the diegetic world of the characters. And this is inspired by how we imagine scenes in our heads from films. And Winters uses Jaws as an example. If you think about the shark in your head, you almost reflexively bring up John Williams' two-note motif. In this light, the music seems attached to the images, and so as important to the fictional world of the film as the sets, the dialogue, or the costumes. This does, however, go against the dominant theory of film music, which says that the musical score exists in a higher narrative level added artificially on top of the score. But Winters says that there are many different unrealities which we accept as being part of the film, part of the diegesis. And he looks at a scene from Apollo 13.
We turn them around, straight back, direct abort.
Where flight director Gene Kranz explains a simple concept to his colleagues.
No, sir. We get them on a free return trajectory. It's the option with the fewest question marks for safety.
I agree with Jerry. Use the moon's gravity, slingshot them around.
In any real-world scenario, there would be no reason for him to explain this. So the exposition is for us as viewers, not for them. And so if we can accept this unreality being as part of the fiction of the world, then why not the music? Winters goes on to define different levels of diegesis for film music, but the one I'm interested in is intradiegesis. This is music that exists in between the real world of the film and our world.
The movie. It's called Paul Mescal Behind the Scenes.
Behind the scenes, BTS.
You can think of it as music that can either be heard by the characters, but not produced by an in-world source, or instead controlled by the characters in some meaningful way. For example, their actions and movements are mimicked in the score, so-called Mickey Mousing.
What do you want to talk about?
Or their emotions are deeply reflected in a particular cue.
He's looking at you, kid.
In this light, the music seems to exist in the same narrative space as the characters. And it's when I applied this theory, this idea of intradiegesis, to the dance scene in Aftersun, that I began to fully understand it. The music, Under Pressure by David Bowie and Freddie Mercury, begins in a purely diegetic space.
Last night, time for a dance.
But very quickly, the song fragments. It breaks down into just the vocal line, and a new underscore is added by Oliver Coates, which brilliantly duets with Freddie Mercury. Accepted theory would say that the music has just moved from being diegetic to non-diegetic, moving from the real world of the film to the musical score. But at what point did it detach from the fiction of the world, or did it ever? I'd argue that it's all in the same narrative space, framed by Sophie's perception and understanding of the world as an adult. What Winters would term intradiegetic because it seems to be controlled by her. When Charlotte Wells is interviewed about this sequence, she acknowledges that the lyrics are obvious when paired with the film. And many people have said that this acts as a brilliant reflection of the narrative. But I don't think that goes far enough. I think they are the narrative. Sophie is projecting her own fear and anxiety onto this scene, her terror of knowing what the world is about, her pressure, her father's pressure that burns a building down, splits a family in two. This is something that's foreshadowed earlier in the film when Sophie is sitting at the bar and Never Ever by All Saints plays on the radio. This is straight after the moment when her dad has left her to crash on stage. And she's feeling alone, abandoned, and embarrassed. The overtly explanatory lyrics feel too precise to belong to these moments. Instead, they act as retrospective commentary. I think we are witnessing the process of reconstruction of the past in real time. Sophie isn't necessarily making this moment up, but she's reorganizing reality in order to understand it. This all reminds me of a line from one of my favorite books, The Sonic Self by Naomi Cumming. It is when I become aware of the outward face of my musical identity as a pattern of actions that I can begin to question how I am constrained in my performance. The outward identity reflects a pattern of belief, desire, and inhibition that constitutes an inner self. What it is to be me. Sophie's dance acts as an outward reflection of her inner self. She is performing her grief. Now, this is obviously just one way of looking at it, but I'd love to hear your thoughts about the ending in the comments below. Thank you so much to all my patrons for supporting my work, and if you'd like to help me make more videos and also to get behind the scenes content, then take a look at my Patreon page linked in the description. See you next time.